Hey y'all, I'm Pavielle, and you're listening to the Purpose Collective Podcast, where each week I invite you to have a seat on the couch and come vibe with me as we explore how to live out our life's purpose. Welcome back to another episode of the show. I have another amazing guest for you this week, and we're talking all about imposter syndrome, which she actually identifies as the imposter experience. I like that better. But the imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. It disproportionately affects high-achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. I know I have dealt with this before. It was very important for me to have someone on the show to talk about it because your purpose calls you to do things that you would have never imagined for yourself. Like, I would have never imagined that I would have a podcast or that I would be coaching people on how to partner with God to discover their life's purpose. It's not anything that I've been formally trained in. So I have feelings and thoughts of, am I equipped to do this sometimes? But in this episode with Dr. Nwaogu, we discussed the root causes of an imposter experience and indicators of it, the implications of a lack of an imposter experience, and tips for overcoming the imposter experience. Here's a formal introduction of Dr. Nwaogu. Dr. Ijeoma Nwaogu is a well-rounded speaker and leadership coach who is deeply passionate and committed to the personal growth, well-being, and progression of people. With a vision of a world where every person embraces their limitless potential, she is on a mission to educate, motivate, inspire, and transform the lives of individuals from various walks of life so that they become better positioned for great success. Ijeoma is the author of Capable Beyond Measure, Overcome the Imposter Experience and Unlock Your Boundless Capacity to Succeed. She's also the CEO of Everlead LLC, a leadership coaching and consulting enterprise. As the head coach and founding faculty of her signature program, Success Her Way, a premier career pivot accelerator, Ijeoma helps women achieve their dream careers, get paid what they're worth, and get the recognition they deserve. With over 15 years of experience working at various higher education institutions across the United States, Ijeoma also served as a director of the Multicultural Center at Rice University in Houston, Texas. She was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and immigrated to the United States at the age of 4. Dr. Nwaogu, welcome to the Purpose Collective.
The Purpose Collective. Thank you for having me, Pavielle. I'm really happy to be here.
Me too. I'm really excited about our discussion. I also asked some listeners of this show if they had questions for you because I know that the imposter experience and imposter syndrome is something that people, especially women, identify with a lot. So I wanted to make sure to get some questions for them. So this is going to be a fun discussion, but my first question, because I'm pretty sure as a child, you had no idea what imposter syndrome was. So what is it that you wanted to do as a kid when you became an adult?
Sure. Yeah, as a kid, man, I wanted to be a professional Broadway dancer. I am super passionate about dance and technical dancing and things of that sort. But coming up as a Nigerian person in a Nigerian household, my parents, very traditional, they didn't believe in paying people to teach you how to dance. They thought it was trivial. They were all about studying science and math because they were science and math people. So my mom knew I wanted to dance and she just didn't understand. But now she's like, she tells me, as an adult, she's like, I wish I really put you in dance classes. I see you had the potential. And so as my parents, they kind of had to grow up in the United States too. And they've unlearned a lot of things and realized a lot of things. And so at least my mom tells me, man, I wish I listened to you. But I'm like, it's okay. I found a new passion and and so forth. So yeah, I wanted to become a dancer. I just remember always like having dinner, and I lived in a household of 10 people. And after dinner, I would watch like 30 minutes of TV and then leave the living room and go up to my room, and I'll be staring at the mirror, dancing, like doing all these Aaliyah choreography and all sorts of dance moves from Janet Jackson and all that. So my dad had a problem with it, and he would be like, why don't you spend time with your family? We're all downstairs watching TV. And I'm like, I just, want some alone time, but he never understood that. But those are just some early memories of how much I loved dance. And at least I got to cheerlead. I was a cheerleader for all 4 years in high school. So that had a little dance element to it, and did some dancing in college. But I found psychology the second semester of my freshman year. And that's, to me, is my other passion. And that really woke me up, because in high school, I felt like the focus was really on STEM stuff and not a lot of talk about social sciences and things like that. So when I found psychology in college, I was like, this is me. This is exactly the realm that I'm supposed to be in. And so I started studying that, took it up as a major, and the rest is history.
Wow, what an amazing journey. When you said you were in your room doing Aaliyah choreography, I could relate to that so hard. I mean, Aaliyah was she's an excellent, effortless dancer. Every move that she made, no matter how complicated it would be, like so easy.
So easy, but it really is not. She makes it look so, like, what's the word? She had so much swag, right?
Yes, heavy swag and very graceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really loved Aaliyah back then, so still do. Still a big fan, so.
Same. Sometimes people ask the question, would Aaliyah still be around today? Like, would she still be popping? And I'm like, who knows? But I know that, I loved her back then.
Yeah, I feel like she probably would have done things like how Rihanna's doing things, how Rihanna became a billionaire. I think Aaliyah certainly had that potential. When I watched her videos, she was so smart, beyond her years. And I was like, wow, this girl would have been a force to be reckoned with if she was still alive.
Absolutely. So how did you go from, learning and studying psychology in college to then working in higher education at Rice?
Yeah, I went to Georgia State University in Atlanta, and that's a time in my life where I really got to spread my wings and explore my leadership. So in college, I was really drawn to a lot of student involvement, student life activities, being a student leader, that type of thing. And I realized how much I valued college student life, like their growth, their development, their learning, because that was what was happening with me. And I just loved leadership development. I loved personal development. I loved learning about psychology. And I was curious about applying it to help college students. So we had this one director of student life. She was a Black woman, and she carried herself with such class and poise, and everyone loved her, and everyone I was around wanted to be like her, including me. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do career-wise, but I want to do what she does. I want to be just like her, and she was not only the director of student life, she was also an educator, in higher ed, teaching like leadership and things like that. So I just wanted to do everything she did. So I found out that there was a master's program in college student affairs administration. Not many people know about that. It is within the study of higher education, but the focus of that particular master's degree is to learn the psychology of college students so you could help them learn and grow and shape spaces for them to thrive, right? So I studied all of that and worked in higher ed in that capacity as an administrator, as an educator. And when you study student affairs, you can do some education, do some administration. So it was a combination of both. So growing up, I never really wanted to be a teacher. As a matter of fact, I tried my hardest not to be a teacher. I didn't think it was appealing. My mother was a high school teacher, and I saw what she had to go through. I just know how high school kids are, just P through 12 in general. I wanted nothing to do with it. But then when I got to college, I was like, I like college students. That's what I really like. And I never saw myself as someone who would be imparting knowledge onto anybody. I didn't think I was that smart. So I was like, what am I doing teaching somebody how to do stuff? But luckily, by the time I was in my master's and doctoral program, I realized that there was a lot of knowledge I wanted to share. And the way to share it is through teaching. So that's how I kind of entered that, if you will.
What a journey. How did you find your way into imposter syndrome and educating around that experience?
Awesome. Yeah. It has a lot to do with psychology, right? Understanding, that self-doubt and so forth. But I had heavy imposter feelings and thoughts and just that entire experience when I was in my master's program. And I turned into something that I never before saw myself become. Like, I shrunk myself in class. I did not raise my hand to speak up. It was a cohort style program where it's like 15 of us sitting in a circle, the program or the classes really focuses on dialogue. It's not like the professor will give a lot of discourse. It's like us students, we had to contribute and talk. And I never spoke up in those 3-hour classes. And I was just sitting in those seats full of anxiety, looking to my left, looking to my right, wondering like, what will they think of me? What if I say something stupid? And then going home filled with regret for not saying anything. And there were a few factors. I think one of the factors was I was one of the few persons of color in that class. It was like majority white folks. And I wasn't, I just felt like it was a threat to open my mouth because I might say something wrong or I had the stereotype threat. I don't know if you've heard of stereotype threat where you're afraid to say something because it might match a stereotype about your identity group. So coming in with the ideas of Black women, whatever you want to think about Black women. And I hate to name those things, but I'm just going to assume that we kind of know some of those general stereotypes and carrying that with me and thinking that that's how they're going to think of me. So the best thing to do is just to be quiet. So I was dealing with that as well. So being outnumbered, feeling like the other or the only one in that space, and also grappling with that stereotype threat. And also I noticed dealing with a lot of childhood experiences or childhood traumas, things people have said to me that I carried with me, and it would show up when it was time to perform. Like when it was time to do a presentation, I'll remember what this adult figure said about me when I was 12 or something. Like, what do you can't talk, you can't speak, you're not that smart, or, those sorts of thoughts are things that I would recall, and then it'll make me kind of shrivel up or not perform as well because my mind is occupied with thoughts of like not being an imposter, right? So my master's program was when I was hit with it really hard. And then after that program, I think I was like 24 when I was done with the program and got a job and all that. But I would sometimes reflect back on that experience like, man, why did I show up like that? Why was it so heavy back then for me? Why I talk, I'm not shy, those kind of things. But why did I stay silent for 2 years in that program? That's crazy. And I started learning about imposter syndrome. At the time, I'd never heard of imposter syndrome. I thought something was wrong with me. And once you learn about it, you realize that it's a common experience. It's normal. And I grapple with this idea of syndrome being attached to the experience name because to me, syndrome implies that there's some sort of abnormality. I don't want people to associate their experience with being abnormal because it is absolutely normal to have an imposter experience, especially if you are entering spaces that's growing and challenging you. It's good, it's good that you're entering those spaces and there is nothing wrong with you. Therefore, it's just a general, common, normal experience that most of us will encounter at some point in our lives or another. And the original term, people know it as imposter syndrome. The original term was imposter phenomenon. Phenomenon means like a common lived experience. So I just call it imposter experience, right? And the originator was like, why are people calling it syndrome? Like, why are we doing this? Can we go back to imposter phenomenon? So I agree with her in that. And, phenomenon is synonymous with experience, if you will. So that's what I regard it as. And when I think of the entire experience, I think of the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors that make up that experience. Like, what are you thinking? You're thinking, I'm not good enough or I don't belong. And then the feelings you have can be anxiety, fear. You might even experience anger with yourself. It could be sadness that you feel like you're never going to improve. It could be shame, all these things, all these feelings that are associated with that experience. And then with the behaviors part, when you feel like an imposter, you can show up in 4 different behaviors. And you've probably heard of them before. It's fight, flight, freeze. And then the 4th one that people don't talk about often is fawn. So fawning is people pleasing, where you alter yourself to please somebody else because you're afraid they may reject you or whatnot. So you either fight by pushing back or overworking yourself or getting defensive. You flight or flee, you run away from the situation. You don't apply for that job. So freeze to me is when you disengage. You don't speak up. You don't raise your hand. You're kind of stuck and you don't know what to do because if you make a move, it might be the wrong move. right? So those are the imposter behaviors, and all of that, those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors make up this overall experience.
That was a mouthful.
I know, right? Whew. Mm-hmm.
I have questions. So if you had to define the imposter experience, how would you define it?
I know, right? Because it's such a broad, like you could define it in so many different ways. But if I had to bring it down, I would say it's like this multifaceted experience of anxiety and self-doubt. So I would just say anxiety and self-doubt. I think everything else, when you talk about feelings of unbelonging, all of that can be summed up with like self-doubt or just those feelings. It's like the anxiety feelings. So I would just say anxiety and self-doubt.
Why do you think that we have such doubt about ourselves and our abilities, and why are we fearful about our ability or inability to do something? Where does that come from?
I know, right? I look at external and internal factors. So external factors are like things outside of you, things that you can't necessarily control. Sometimes you can control them. And then those internal factors are things like your survival instinct, which we all have. So I think the imposter experience is a byproduct of our survival instinct. So when we enter these new or challenging spaces, our survival instincts will trigger that fear to tell us, nope, don't go there. But the problem is it doesn't always understand the assignment. It tries to protect us from things that it perceives as harm or a threat. And the threat is to be exposed as a fraud, right? So it's trying to protect you from harm. And in this case, emotional harm when it comes to the imposter experience. But it doesn't understand that some of these spaces are growth opportunities. And when we recognize that something is a growth opportunity, we can kind of have compassion for our instinct that's telling us, move away, move away. We could say, I understand you're trying to protect me, but I got this, right? And then you do the opposite of what it's telling you to do. So that's one way of responding effectively to that instinct that will naturally come and tell you, stay away. Otherwise, you're going to be exposed, right? When that's not even really the case. It's great for like physical danger, right? Like if a dog is about to attack you, that instinct is like, you better run. Yeah, you better listen to the instinct then. But when it's time to take up leadership, when it's time to apply for a job you really want, when it's time to ask that girl out on a date that you really like, when it's time to, step into your greatness, it's going to show up. It's inevitable. No matter how many self-help books or advice you get, we can't like obliterate our instincts from triggering fear in us or even just having an imposter experience. To me, how I interpret imposter feelings is it's a sign of success. It's a sign of success because it's telling me that you're entering a space that can stretch you, that can grow you, that could advance you. It doesn't feel good, but it's an indicator that you are on the right path to growing and learning something in a situation.
Sometimes when the imposter experience is being talked about in conversation, listeners take the experience of the person and they believe it to be that person lacks confidence. Does imposter syndrome or the imposter experience equal a lack of confidence?
I wouldn't say it equals. There is some relationship, like if you generally are not confident about yourself, if you have low self-esteem, you likely will have, will manifest those imposter thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. But you could very well be a confident person in general. You believe in general you're able to do things you set your mind to do. But when you enter certain contexts that feel a little bit scary, those imposter thoughts and feelings can come. Doesn't mean that you're not a confident person. It's just contextual. When you enter certain spaces, that's when certain thoughts, feelings, and behaviors will come about. So I understand because the imposter thoughts will tell you you're not able to do that. You're not good enough. And then confidence is about your ability to do, like, do you believe in your ability to do something, right? So there is a relationship there. But I mean, I know all my life, I've always generally been a confident person. When I entered my master's program space, that's when those imposter feelings show up. But outside of that, I was always good. I was always doing what I wanted to do, speaking up, So that's when I learned, like, this is really contextual.
What are some indicators that someone might be having an imposter experience?
Indicators, when somebody's reflecting on their thoughts They could know, like, if they're thinking in their mind, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve to be here, I need to get more skills before I dive into this, those kind of things, that's an indicator. If you feel very uncomfortable or anxious and it makes you shrink, that's another indicator. And then again, if you are applying any of those 4 imposter behaviors, if you find yourself trying to make things perfect before you submit it, like overly perfect, like trying way too hard to the point you're exhausting yourself, that's an indicator that you're afraid of being exposed as a fraud versus trusting yourself that this is enough. This is enough, right? I can't kill myself. I could do my best, but I can't try to overwork myself, burn myself out, and striving for perfection. Yeah, I would reflect, like, am I leaning into those opportunities that I really want, or am I allowing fear to tell me that I don't deserve it? Those kind of questions are some good questions. I wanted to point this out too. You talked about I think you said, what are some factors that contribute to the imposter experience? And I mentioned internal factors, external factors. And when I think of external factors, I think of, let's say you're super excited about your new job. You're the only woman of color in a predominantly white space, for example. And you enter that space ready to contribute, ready to like give back, ready to just share your knowledge. And then people start treating you differently. People start like cutting you off in meetings. People start like criticizing all of your insight. People start not inviting you to meetings. You're going to start to question yourself and be like, gosh, do I even belong here? Do they even like me? Do they think I know what I'm talking about? And so you start to feel like you don't belong. And that happens so often to Black women. They come into spaces confident and ready, but they're outside, the environment is not nurturing to them. And so that's why I even think you have to separate confidence from imposter syndrome, because think of those people that come in excited and ready to do the work, but then their colleagues or their bosses are not supportive of them. Then they start the questioning, wondering, what am I doing wrong? And it's not their fault. And in that case, I say you're being imposterized. That's what I call it. You're being imposterized because this is not something that's within you. It's not your problem. It's somebody else's. It's your environment. They're the ones who are making you feel like this.
Oh my goodness. An experience that I had immediately came to mind when you were talking about being imposterized. And it was my first year of law school. I was attending a law school in Georgia. I later transferred back to a school in Florida, where I'm from. But it was my first semester, and law school is challenging. They give you that whole speech at orientation. Look to your left, look to your right. Only a few of you guys will still be here at the end. And I'm in a class with 5 Black people. There were 5 of us and hundreds of everybody else. So I remember being in my legal writing class, and they would send us on this scavenger hunt into the law library. We're not supposed to call them scavenger hunts, but I don't know what to call it. But that's what it was.
Is that like a politically incorrect? Is it politically incorrect or something?
I'm not sure, but
I never heard of that. That's interesting.
You know what I think it is? I think that the schools are not allowed to say it like that for some reason.
I need to do research on that.
Some like legal implications or something, but basically they send us on a scavenger hunt in the law library. So they give us a sheet of paper with maybe 10 things that we're supposed to find. And as you get further and further down the list, the items become more difficult to find. So, and honestly, they're making us do things that are completely outdated, because now most of the information about case law is on the internet. So we don't need to use books that much in the law library, right? But anyway, we should still know how to do this in case we need to research a case that's in these books and not on the online database, whatever. So we get to maybe like question number 8 or 9, and I find the answer, what I think to be the answer. And I'm in a group, I'm the only Black person. It's about 15 students in this group. And I articulate what I believe the answer to be and where we can find it. No one listens to me.
Oh.
No one listens to me. It's almost as if no one heard me. So when I say no one listened to me, I mean no one even acknowledged that I said anything. So no one even looked in my direction. Like, I'm saying words and everyone is looking everywhere that's not me. So I said it multiple times just in case it came out as a whisper, and no one looked at me, and we were stuck because we all have to have the same answer. So it's not like I can choose my answer and just keep it moving. We all have to have the same answer. So we're stuck there for about 30 minutes until someone else comes to the conclusion that I reached 30 minutes ago.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And it shifted how I showed up in law school, which is I no longer wanted to do group projects, especially where I was in a group where I was the minority or the only, which is often because there were hundreds of people in the class and there was only 5 Black people. There were only 5 people of color. Like, that's just what it is. So I just didn't do anything in groups, and I didn't raise my hand to answer any questions. Except in one class. There was one class, my teacher, my professor, he was this older man. He is Jewish, and he was extremely kind, and he welcomed people to raise their hands, and he didn't use the Socratic method as hard as all of the other professors because this class was very small. So he wanted more engagement because there were under 20 of us in the class, whereas some classes, it was 100 of us in class. So I would shine in that class because I felt very comfortable with him. He was extremely kind and patient with first-year law students. And I thrived in that class. This class that I scored the highest on my exams. But yeah, I shut up in law school, okay? I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, man, I love your story. And it also just, because I'm so passionate about this topic, when I hear you speak about it, it just makes me so frustrated because, wow. And it's interesting how you just thrived in a space where you felt supported. Amazing. And it's just so unfortunate because I'm sure you had so much to give, so much to offer, but then you were silenced. I wouldn't even call it silent. You were silent because you were silenced, and how that had such a deep impact. And I'm wondering, did you ever get a chance to vocalize it at any point in the program?
No, I didn't. They don't really provide opportunities for it. I actually don't even remember those students because I did not matriculate through that program. I left. And that was one of the reasons why I left. It wasn't that experience solely, but it was just because I did not want to be in an environment where there were not a good amount of people who looked like me. And, I'm from Florida. It's a very diverse state, depending on what part of the state you live in. So there's multiple language speakers, there's multiple ethnicities and nationalities represented. And I'm just used to being in an environment like that. Whereas at that school that I went to in Georgia, it was pretty much just, Black Americans and white Americans. Like, that's it. So I was like, I can't do this. I need to go back home to a school where I know that there's going to be diversity in thought and diversity in the student population as far as nationalities and ethnicities present. But no, I didn't.
Yeah, I hear that. I had a similar experience just like yours, but just with less people. But it was the same thing. I was the only Black person in that predominantly white group, and it was all white. I was the only Black person in this leadership coaching program. And same thing, we were assigned a group assignment, and we were trying to come up with some ideas or whatever, or answers for what the presenter was asking us to do. I can't really remember the detail. But then I offered the suggestion, same thing as you described. It was as if they never heard me. I didn't exist. And I was looking around, and they just started talking amongst each other, writing each other's ideas down. And when it was time to present the ideas, the spokesperson presented the ideas. And then the presenter was like, oh, did you think about this? And this thing was what I had suggested that they never even acknowledged. And that even boiled my blood even more. Like, wow. I could see if I was incorrect, but it was just that I wasn't heard. Didn't matter whether I was correct or not. So I think groups miss out on opportunities when they're operating with stereotypes. And sometimes it's at an unconscious level. They're not even aware that they're doing it. Some people do deliberately exclude others, but sometimes they're so conditioned to not see, to not acknowledge certain people. And that's part of their automatic functioning, unfortunately. And it's just really interesting how that works.
It is. One thing that I learned from you is there are implications that people can have when they experience an absence of imposter syndrome or when they don't have an imposter experience. What can it mean if we don't experience being, thinking that we're fraudulent in how we show up in the world?
Yeah. Having imposter feelings, of course, like I said, it doesn't feel good. But at the same time, it tells me, like I said before, you're stepping into something that will grow and stretch you. And that's what I would lean into and really acknowledge more. Now, it's important to get those tools to respond to those feelings effectively, even though we can't wipe it out of our existence forever. It's a lifelong process that we're going to go through the imposter experience as long as we're entering new spaces, right? New opportunities, new challenges. It's going to show up, but then you know how to handle it once you have those tools. And you could say, I recognize this. I recognize these feelings. It must mean that I'm on my way to success. So let me lean into that. And I would actually question those I've heard some people say, I've never had an imposter experience. I'm like, then what have you been doing all your life? Where have you been? Under a rock? Or I'm like, are you that confident? I don't know how to say it. I don't want to start saying narcissistic or whatever, even though I did just say it, but I start to wonder about certain people, because we all have that instinct. We have that hard wiring, that inborn instinct that's trying to just keep us alive, trying to help us survive. But we just have to know how to respond to it effectively. And it's something that most of us will encounter.
How did you overcome your imposter thoughts and feelings when you were having your experience?
Yeah, at the time, I didn't have the tools. I didn't even know what imposter syndrome was until a couple of years after. Like I said, when I was reflecting and I was thinking back at that time, man, why did I show up like that? So I think reflecting on it, and then that's when, I don't even remember how I started learning about imposter syndrome, but just through my constant studies, maybe my doctoral program, I started learning about imposter syndrome. And I'm like, okay, this is familiar. I had this in my master's program and just started learning more about it. But I was able to show up as my fullest self, show up more authentically in my doctoral program because I was able to now recognize what this thing is, the fact that it's normal, the fact that it's a common experience, the fact that there's nothing wrong with me. Once I had that knowledge, I could then say, okay, well then there's no threat. There's nothing wrong with me showing up as my full self. I think for me, there was just some maturity there as well. Just living, experiencing, knowing more, and reflecting and saying, man, my insights were just as valid as that of my peers. When I would think about what they used to say and think about what I wanted to say but didn't say, I could have added so much value to those classroom conversations. And that's also what's helped me to realize I have much to offer. And I'm never going to shut myself down like this again, because there's some insights that could help people learn and grow as well.
Do you have any tips for anyone who might be listening who may be having an imposter experience of their own?
Yeah, I think that people need facts. They want logic and rationale to know that they are good enough. And oftentimes you'll hear people giving these affirmative words like, you're great, you can do it, you're capable, you got this. But sometimes those words can feel really empty because it's like, well, how do you know that I'm capable? How do you know that I got this? How do you know that I can do it? So I would encourage listeners to get that piece of paper and a pen, spend time in solitude, and write down all of your accomplishments, your successes, things you're proud of about yourself, your strengths. And then beside it, you write why, or how you know you have those strengths. What have you achieved to really tell you that you have those strengths? What's the feedback you've gotten from colleagues, bosses, friends, neighbors, whoever you want to say, parents? What are those characteristics you possess that add value to the world? What are those strengths you have that's different from the people around you? What have you actually achieved? Once you write down all that, that's your confirmation versus just empty affirmations. So prove to yourself by spending time in solitude to document and keep a success document for yourself that you could whip out when you have those doubts show up. And you could remember how dope you are, because imposter thoughts will cloud your thinking. It'll make you forget about all the good things you've achieved. But until you are intentional and see it for yourself, that cloud, that imposter cloud can start fading away so you could refocus and get empowered again.
My last question for you is actually a listener question. A listener of the show wanted to know how to maintain confidence without it turning into conceit.
Oh, conceit. Whew. Wow. Conceited. Okay, well, I'm just trying to reflect on the word conceited. When I think someone is conceited, that tells me they think that other people don't add value to the world the way they do, the way they can. So I think that comes from an ignorant. I'm not saying ignorant to be mean, but I'm just saying ignorant to use it as a lack of knowledge. That's kind of a ignorant way to operate, an ignorant approach, because what we should all know that everyone adds value to this world. Everyone has their set of skills and competencies and natural gifts. So once you know that, I don't know how anyone could be conceited, because you know that you have particular strengths that someone else doesn't have, and they have strengths that you don't have. But if we all work collaboratively or just celebrate each other's gifts, we can operate in a more humble, appreciative way of the multiple talents. So for me, true confidence is about humility. It's about saying, I know I got skills and I know the next person got skills. So what's up? How are we going to collaborate? That to me is real confidence. So if you have real confidence, there's nothing wrong with strengthening that confidence. But to me, confidence is not even related to conceit. Conceit, I almost think it's rooted in insecurity, the need to feel that you have to step on someone else's head or be better than someone else to feel good about yourself. That's pretty empty. That's rooted in insecurity. And I would even say those who fall into being conceited are even dealing with imposter feelings themselves in trying to maybe overcompensate for something, or just trying too hard to paint a picture that they've got it all together.
Agreed. Oh, this was so good. But I cannot let you go just yet. I have to ask you my lightning round of questions. Are you ready?
Sure. Ooh, fun. Oh, man, I love those kind of questions. Let's go.
Right. So much fun. Okay. What's the best book that you've read in the last year?
Ooh, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I think that's her last name. That book it changed my life. She's an excellent writer. And as an author myself, I aspire to write a memoir similar to hers.
Her writing is so excellent.
Oh my gosh. Full circle writing.
Mm-hmm. And the way that she crafts her words is just amazing. Okay, next question. What is your favorite form of self-care?
Kicking back with my husband, watching movies. Like, that's our thing. We just lay in bed and watch those movies.
So cute. What is your ideal vacation location?
Oh my God. Any beach that's warm. Man, just a beach.
And what is the best show that you've binged recently?
Oh, God, that's hard. Oh, killing me. Behind Her Eyes. It's on Netflix. Behind Her Eyes. The ending blew me away. I wish they could make more shows like that.
Did you read the book?
No.
Okay. I was just trying to see if I should read the book versus watch the show, because I completely forgot about Behind Her Eyes.
Did you see the ending? Did you watch the whole thing?
I've never seen it.
Oh, no, but the thing I love about that book, no one will ever predict, in my opinion. I don't know how anybody could know what would happen at the end, but it just blew me away. I love crazy endings.
Okay, I'm going to check it out. You guys always give me such good TV shows to check out. Okay, I know I said I didn't have any more questions, but I do have one more question. How can we keep up with you?
Sure. Yeah, I am on Instagram at Ijeoma Leads. So that's IJEOMA and the word leads. So that's the best way to find me, or my website, IjeomaNwaogu.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for stopping by the show and sharing your expertise. We appreciate you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Pavielle.
Look at you. You have made it to the end of yet another episode of the Purpose Collective podcast. I've enjoyed having you. If you're looking to connect with other purpose-driven movers and shakers like you, then make sure to join our exclusive community for members of the collective over on Facebook. You can find us by searching the Purpose Collective community on Facebook. If this episode has inspired you at all, then make sure to like, rate, follow, and leave a review of the show. When you do, it helps others find the show and learn all of the great information you've been inspired by. Sometimes I read reviews on the show, so You never know, I just may read yours. Leaving a review is completely free, and an episode can mean everything to someone who's looking for support with their journey and purpose. As always, if you want to connect with me on social media, you can follow me on Instagram at pavielle.esq, and you can follow the show at The Purpose Collective Podcast. I really enjoy interacting with you all on social because it allows us to dive even deeper into the topics I discuss on the show. So don't be shy. Follow me and say hi. Well, that's it. Until next time.